Hello and welcome once again to Sakar, the home of the podcast of champions. I'm your host, Lord Deathman, and I've come back to you now at the turn of the tide. Today we're diving into the animated TV show X-Men 97, or should I say the revival of that much beloved TV show, animated TV show. I refuse to kind of call it a cartoon. We're going to be talking about it as a spectacular revival of the original show from 1997. It just concluded its first season to widespread acclaim from both fans and critics. I would say, and I don't think this would be with any hyperbole, that this is something that I think MCU fans have been excited about more so than anything that has probably happened in the last 2 or 3 years for the franchise. Before we proceed with the discussion in depth, I do want to give out a quick spoiler alert. We are going to be delving into the specifics of the season. So if you haven't caught up yet, you know the drill. Consider this your fastball special of a warning. We will be talking about the show in a huge amount of detail. Before we get started, I did want to make some comments, and my fellow champions here have allowed me to indulge in talking a little bit about the legacy of the X-Men. It is, bar none, my favorite comic book property. And while I ironically was not a huge fan of the animated series when it was coming out, because I'd read so many of the comic books, the cartoon almost seemed, or I should say, the animated TV show seemed a little bit redundant with regards to the way it was sort of remixing and remashing all of the different stories into one compressed glob of a show for kids. And then the SpaghettiOs X-Men commercials in between the show really didn't help me out in terms of, this could be content for adults. I was a little older in the Death Lord horizon when the cartoon kind of hit the airwaves. But that being said, preamble aside, I think there isn't anyone on this panel or anyone listening who doesn't understand the impact of the X-Men as a superhero property. They may not be your favorites. You may not see them as the most cherished superhero characters in the world, but they certainly do resonate with a whole lot of other people because of the profound subtexts in this IP and the messages about societal acceptance. So I think the X-Men 97 continues this proud tradition of revitalizing a whole bunch of familiar faces that we've seen on the TV shows and in the comic books. And I think they're revitalizing it for an entirely new generation. So I've been participating in a lot of discussion online about this X-Men revival, and I've been talking to two different types of X-Men fans. And I want to point those types of fans out today. I think there are people out there who probably enjoy the X-Men in terms of having a detailed understanding of the universe. They focus a lot on every single plot twist and every character arc, and they're not that interested in the subtext. They're not interested in the woke bits of the mythology, but they do like following the soap opera, and they do like following the melodrama, which I love and adore myself. And then, of course, I think that there are a second set of X-Men fans who connect more with the allegorical aspects of the story. They see the X-Men as a voice for the marginalized, and they like those particular validations on that particular perspective, wherever they may be coming from in their own journey, and they look more towards that in terms of the depth of the series for them. I just want to say that both of those approaches to being an X-Men fan are 100% valid. We should not be in conflict with each other. Nobody should be trying to prove whether the X-Men is a woke property or whether it is not a woke property. I think the wokeness is kind of built into the X-Men, and I think it is appropriate based on the actual premise of the IP. It's not grafted on the way you might see it happen, awkwardly with a lot of IPs today. It's baked in, which makes it kind of feel more organic. So anyway, to conclude this, I just want to say that I came into this show and I had absolutely no expectations. I was not a huge fan again of the animated TV show when it came out in 97. I watched episodes here and there and I was like, oh, I know that story because I've read 700, literally 700 issues of the X-Men. I've read reprints, I've read backstories, I've followed solo series, mini series. So I was like, okay, I'm kind of good with this. I'm glad that some kids might enjoy this along with their X-Men themed SpaghettiOs. So, but to see it here revitalized the way it has been on Disney Plus, I just have to say they've done an immensely impressive job of this, and I'm looking forward to season 2. And I hope that this storytelling has some overall impact on the MCU. But now that that is out of the way, guys, and you've heard my rants, you've heard my thoughts on this, feel free to jump in the comics if into the comments and the comics actually, if you disagree with anything that I'm saying. But now I'd like to get to the introduction of the panel for today's discussion. Joining us today to explore the themes further, we have 3 distinguished panelists, starting with the Grandmaster. How are you doing today?
I'm doing great, and
Ready to talk X-Men animated 97?
absolutely, certainly.
Outstanding. Merv, are you ready to talk about X-Men 97 with a world that hates and fears you?
Hopefully nobody hates and fears me, but yes, I am ready.
All right. And last but certainly not least, Taylor, I know the X-Men probably isn't as high up on your list as some of us here on the panel, but I do hope that you could bear with us today as we gush over this, revitalization of the IP. How are you doing today?
I'm good. Ready as I'll ever be.
All right. So there you have it. We've introduced the panel. I'm going to just take a minute to do it. I know it's old hat by now, but I'm going to do some promos. I want everyone to be aware of the super vibrant community of fans that we have on our message board, sakar.freeforums.net. So whether you are looking to share your latest fan theories or explore behind the scenes content for your favorite IPs or connect with fellow enthusiasts, I think our platform honestly is the best and perfect place for you to amplify your voice and kind of join a really cool group of people who are into the fandom experience. You can also check us out on social media. All of that stuff is going to be linked down in the description in terms of the channels where we're operating now. And also, please feel free to jump into the comments and engage with us. We look at every comment and we'll probably answer them if they are there. So without any further ado, I want to go around the table, the metaphorical table, and sort of get quick impressions on what we thought about this first season of the revival of X-Men 97. And Taylor, I'd love to start with you.
Get it out of the way first, huh? It didn't do a whole lot for me. Now, that stands to reason because the original show in the 90s never really grabbed me either. I tried watching it many times and just never able to stick with it. It just never thrilled me. As far as this season goes, again, same thing. As you alluded to, it seemed like they took a couple of decades worth of overly complicated and boring X-Men comic storylines and shoved them into 10 episodes of a cartoon. And it didn't grab my attention with most of it, I'm afraid. The execution was fine. The animation was good. The voice acting and all was fine. It's kind of strange that I didn't like the original show. I'm not sure. I can't really put my finger on why necessarily, because I loved all the other superhero cartoons from the 90s, the Spider-Man cartoon from the 90s, the Hulk, Batman the animated series. I love all those. I still watch them whenever I can. But for some reason, the X-Men never grabbed me. And again, in my defense, in the comic books, the X-Men never really grabbed me either. In my time of when I was reading comics regularly, X-Men just didn't interest me very much. And when we get in deep dive, we can talk various reasons. But as far as this show goes, I would say it's equal in quality to the original because neither one of them gave me much to care about, I'm afraid.
And you know what? To a certain extent, I can kind of sympathize with you there, Taylor, because like I said, I was not the biggest X-Men 97 fan when the show was actually running. I would tune in for an episode, kind of see where they were in the chronology of the comic books, and I'd be like, oh, I know that story arc. They've just smashed it down into 5 minutes. And it seems like it's wildly compressed, and they've gotten like the causes and effects for all these different story beats wrong. But there was something that kept me tuning in every once in a while. So I can sympathize with you to a certain extent by saying that the show never did anything for me during its original airing, but I do have a lot of respect for what they've managed to do with the revival here. But thanks for those comments and those notes, Taylor. I am going to move on though and ask Merv for your quick impressions on season 1 of the X-Men 97 animated TV series.
Well, perhaps solely, I did love the 90s cartoon whenever I was growing up. I was probably about 8 years old whenever it came out, so it was like right in that wheelhouse of the early 90s superhero stuff was all, I loved it all, but particularly I think I was drawn to the X-Men. In this, so I don't want to say that it had like a mountain to live up to, but the X-Men property itself is something that I've always like really been interested in and really been a fan of. So I'm familiar with probably a lot more lore here than I am with a lot of other stuff, especially like lately MCU material. So it had a little bit of a hill to climb, and I think it exceeded it like tenfold. I couldn't have been more excited to watch each and every episode this season, and I'm super excited for next season. Hopefully there is a next season. I assume it's greenlit, but I just can't get enough of this.
It's official.
It's official.
Yeah.
I've rewatched every episode at least twice. Some of them like 3-4 times. So,
oh wow!
This is by far. I mean, as far as TV shows go, this is probably my favorite thing that the MCU has done since Disney Plus became a thing.
Wow. Those are huge kudos and praise coming from Merv, and that doesn't come easy with him, guys. So I respect Merv's opinion on a whole lot of things, and while never combative, I think he's always honest in terms of his praise. So we're going to circle back and get your deep thoughts on some of it since you were so enthusiastic. I like that we have some contrast here in terms of the discussion, in terms of how people are feeling about it. And last, but certainly not least, we do have the Grandmaster. What was your impression of it? Did you watch the original 97 cartoon? How did you feel about the new season?
Well, actually, I'm going to be blasphemous for a second. I never read the comics. Actually, I never read any comics. Well, sort of. I did read some, but not much. So my first introduction to the X-Men was the 90s cartoon back in the day. And I'm not going to claim that I was a major fan who watched it all in order and rewatched it when it came out on Disney Plus. No, I was a casual viewer, but it was my introduction to the X-Men, and I always liked it. It was never like Taylor said, it grabbed me, but not like I was super invested or anything. I watched the movies, all of them. My opinion on them is fairly known on the board, and I will make it public now. I don't really care for the movies. So the X-Men property for me has always been like, yeah, it's okay, but nothing special. However, I do see the resemblance with Trek a little bit, where it tells stories while underneath there's another story they're trying to tell about current day society, which I actually enjoy very much. So for that I give them kudos. Well, then this first season of X-Men 97, I watched it this week actually because I was busy doing other things in the last few weeks, and I absolutely loved it. It was great. This caught me right, and there were some major highlights which I will talk about later, but I absolutely loved it. So I think I'm a little bit in the middle between Taylor and Merv. when it comes to the show and X-Men in general.
All right. Thank you for that, Grandmaster. It looks like we really have a diverse set of opinions on the show and the IP in general. But loving that the conversation, is so respectful here. As always, that is what we do here on the Podcast of Champions. That being said, I do want to explore deeper analysis, themes, what you may have liked or disliked about the season. And if there are a couple of episodes that you want to pick out as being particularly good, or maybe even not so good in your deep dive analysis, it would be great to hear from the champions on that. So once again, Taylor, I think I'm going to start with you since I know how controversial, I know how you feel about the X-Men. Was there anything that stood out about this season that you found that was particularly bad or good? Talk to us.
Well, as far as good episodes go, I mean, the episode with the attack on Genosha, I thought was well done and well handled. Of course, one of my favorite parts of it was that Gambit died. I'm not a fan of Gambit, but the episode was very well done, and it was fairly powerful the way it was executed. So I thought that was a good episode. The episode where Jubilee was in the video game was fun.
Yeah.
Because she was in a video game. Other than that, I'm hard pressed to even remember other episodes. Unlike Marv, who have watched every episode multiple times, I really had to force myself to watch each of them once. Honestly, I kept forgetting that the show was on, and I'm like, oh yeah, I have to watch this week's episode.
Well, we
so again, the deep dive.
Yeah, no, please go ahead. No, go ahead.
So again, in the deep dive, as I said, too many storylines that were too complicated, too many characters, which I think has always been a problem with X-Men. Too many characters, not that there shouldn't be in the universe, but in one story at one time. There's just too many characters sometimes, and a lot of the characters, and this is true of the comics sometimes, but I think in this season, it's showed up quite a few times that their powers are so vague sometimes and so nebulous and so fungible. Hey, this episode, this person needs to be able to do this, so let's do that. I mean, Magneto goes to the North Pole and shuts down the entire world. That's a little extreme. I kind of rolled my eyes when that happened. What else? Like I said, like for example, Morph, who I'm not really familiar with from the comics, and I don't remember him from the earlier cartoons, but apparently he's like Gaia from Secret Invasion. He has every power whenever he wants it, including non-X powers. He can turn into the Hulk and others. So why do we need anyone else? I'm not sure. And why didn't he go up to the North Pole and turn into Magneto and undo whatever Magneto did, if that's what we're gonna do? Or the other part I like is a lot of times there would be a character would appear and I'm like, oh, that's a cool character. I like that character. Oh wait, they were only on screen for a few seconds because it was actually Morph pretending to be that character. I'm like, well, I would have liked to have seen those actual characters, some of them, show up. Blob and Psylocke and Juggernaut. I would have liked to have seen, some of them actually in the show as opposed to Morph just cameoing each of them for a few seconds, multiple times.
Yeah.
Other than that, like you said, some people really love the soap opera aspects of the X-Men. For me, I mean, I like stories. I like stories that are well written and clever and complicated to a degree, but too much soap opera in a superhero, what's supposed to be a superhero action cartoon, gets under my skin after a while. So like I said, I'm not going to sit here and say it's a horrible show or anything. I'm just saying it's just not my cup of tea. And like I said, I mostly forgot each episode as soon as I turned off the TV.
Fair enough. I do want to press you just a little bit in terms of like some of the dramatic aspects of it, in terms of the relationships between the characters. Did none of that really resonate for you in terms of, say, Storm and Forge getting together as a couple? Or is that type of soap opera-ishness really not for you?
I didn't like the whole storyline, honestly, of Storm losing her powers, and then that whole weird episode with the owl demon thing. I don't even know what was going on there. And I barely know who Forge is. And I can picture him in my mind, but I have no idea what his powers is or if he's one of the ones from the future or not. I know,
Right.
I know, their son is from the future. And I know that character. His name is slipping me right now, but I know that character, and he's actually a cool character. But Forge, I don't know much about him. I don't know much about Bishop, and then, like I said, I like the core X-Men. I like Wolverine. I like Beast. I like Jubilee, even though they underuse Jubilee quite a bit, in my opinion. I would like to see her more with her, and I didn't think her side story with this guy with the sun powers. I didn't think that was interesting either.
Sunspot.
And
Yeah.
the whole why am I forgetting their names? The guy with the laser eyes, and the marriage to Jean Grey and Jean Grey's clone, and I'm still not sure which one is the mother of the guy from the future.
Nathan.
Just again, and I'll be honest. When I watch regular TV shows, I have this same problem. I often don't care about the B stories, the side stories, the relationship stories. Like when I'm watching something like, Magnum PI or something, and they have all these relationship stories going on. No, all I pay attention to is actually the mystery of the week on those types of shows. And the same thing with my superhero shows. I'm kind of like, I want a good story, I want a good villain, I want a good plot, and I want a good fight. And I don't need a lot of extra other stuff besides that.
Right. Well, while I can agree with you in terms of this being a lot of information that they packed into a single season in terms of slice and dicing the stories, which has always sort of been something that is, I don't want to say bothered me, but I'm like, wow, they're really taking years of homework that I did collecting the series and reading these stories and turning it into like 10 to 15 minute segments in an animated presentation. I have a positive reception for the show overall, but I could see that how the X-Men being a real deal soap opera that leans so much into its melodrama could be fatiguing to the average superhero fan. But I really do have to press once again. I mean, some of those action sequences that you see in those episodes, Taylor, are really spectacular. Did none of that really land with you?
Yeah, like I said, I think some of the action scenes were good. Like I said, the one on Kenosha was good. The action scenes when Professor X was in outer space, I actually thought that was pretty interesting with the Kree and everything.
Yeah.
The fights in the last couple of episodes, the climactic fights, I thought were pretty well executed as well. So yeah, I really didn't have a problem with the action scenes themselves. I thought they were actually pretty good.
Yeah. Yeah, I think they were really top notch, and I don't know how you could translate all of this stuff to live action, but when the live action adaptation of the X-Men does come along, I do hope they take some notes in terms of how some of the X-Men use their powers in the 97 sort of revitalization here. But Taylor, is there anything else you wanted to share with the group in terms of your thoughts on the show, or are you looking forward to a season 2? Maybe not.
Yeah, no, I'm not looking forward to a season 2. I will probably watch it
right into that.
and hope against hope that I enjoy it more, but I'm not looking forward to it. I got other things I'm looking forward to besides that.
Yeah.
And I don't really, I don't, off the top of my head, I don't have anything else to add right now.
Okay, well, we can always circle back. Let us know if anything else comes to mind. Grandmaster, I'm going to turn to you now. And thank you so much, Taylor, for your comments, by the way, as always. But Grandmaster, we're going to turn to you. You being the sort of middle ground in terms of the X-Men 97 revitalization here. Let's get your in-depth analysis. You seem to have enjoyed the show overall. Were there any favorite episodes, moments that stood out to you? Please talk to us.
Yeah, about Taylor's answer to your last question, I pictured another X-Men walking by Quicksilver saying, "You didn't see that coming." But anyway, yeah. Well, Taylor kind of stole my thunder because he picked the 2 episodes I wanted to talk about, Remember It, and the one with video game, because they stood out to me as well, because they were very much enjoyable. However, and I kind of agree with Taylor, the relationship stuff doesn't really do things for me. The thing with Storm and the Owl and Forge and stuff like that, well, couldn't care less. I like Storm as a character, but the fact that she was away for like 5 or 6 episodes before she came back with her powers actually kind of bugged me. The one thing that bothered me the most about the whole season was all of a sudden Rogue and Magneto had a backstory. I don't need that. I get it why they did it, but yeah, to me that was redundant, and I kind of rolled my eyes on that. The positives, yeah, I get what you're saying. Sometimes it felt a bit rushed, things that were happening in the show. Maybe they could have cut some stuff and spread the good stuff a little bit more out. But overall, I really liked what they're trying to do over the season, and the slowly build up to the big bad Bastion. Yeah, that was great. I like Mr. Sinister as a secondary villain. I get what Taylor was saying about the confusion about Jean and Madeline. I like that. That was a nice twist, and my problem has always been with Scott Summers. I don't really like the character. I never liked him in the 90s, and never in the movies. Maybe that's because they never did him justice. No doubt you, Lord Deathman or Merv, can tell me if that's true, if you compare him to the comics. But I never really liked the character, so I also was a little bit. I can't really remember the show from the 90s, so I didn't know if Charles Xavier died in that show at the end. But I didn't like it that he wasn't in the show as much in the beginning. I'm talking about a lot of negatives, but I noticed. But I overall really did like the show. The final 3 episodes were amazing. The action was great. The story was great. Like Taylor said, the attack on Genosha, that was that I actually was shocked when that happened, and when they killed off Gambit. That to me. That I didn't like that they killed off Gambit, because I do like Gambit, and yeah, so that episode actually shocked me, and that was also the episode that really got me invested in the show, because I was like, what's going to happen now? I always like the stuff between Charles Xavier and Eric Ansher, Magneto, and the fact that Charles Xavier was not in the show for like 5-6 episodes, yeah, that was annoying to me, because that was what I was missing. So I'm really happy that we got a lot of that in the last episode, and I like their dynamic, and I like what they're trying to say underneath, and they did that justice. As far as other characters, I like Beast always. I like Wolverine. Yeah, don't care too much about him. And yeah, sorry. Maybe that's Hugh Jackman. I never liked Hugh Jackman in the role, but anyway. But I never cared much about Wolverine. I'm more like the philosophical side, so that's why I like the stuff between Magneto and Charles Xavier. And yeah, Julie. Yeah, she was there. That was nice. But yeah, nice fireworks. We get that a lot at New Year's. But anyway, without kidding, I love the show overall, and it could have been a little bit more spread out, the storyline, a little bit more philosophical and a little less relationship shit. But overall, yeah, I really enjoyed myself.
Okay. Any characters that really stood out to you that you truly loved in terms of the show?
Yeah, I like Cable. I liked him from the Deadpool 2 movie. I liked him. Was it actually the same voice actor, or did he was really similar? Like I forgot his name.
They got someone who was a kind of a sound alike, but
Yeah,
Brolin actually played Cable in the Deadpool film.
yeah. Josh Brolin. The sound, the voice sounded familiar, but it was a sound alike. Okay. But I liked that. I actually liked the fact that Scott and Madeline had to, or Jean, I also got lost, had to send him into the future to save him, and that he came back as Cable. That was I like that a lot, and I like the dynamic in that family a lot. The fact that he accepted Jean as his mother at the end, I really like that, and yeah. And yeah, the Sunspot, yeah. Mm. I like Rogue always in the 90s cartoon. I think she got done dirty in the movies, and then in this series, she took the spotlight again, and then they made her an old lover of Magneto, and that was. I rolled my eyes on that the fact that I liked her so much, and that they had to give her that role as well. So, but I guess they had to create a drama with Gambit. But what overall, Rogue was, I think, the standout character also in this season. Her role in the on the team and with Magneto and in Genosha and everything was outstanding. And the fact that her her hurt feelings made her switch sides for a moment because that didn't last long. Yeah, that was a nice touch.
Yeah.
Which is ironic that I use the word touch when it comes to Rogue, but anyway.
Yeah. I have to say Rogue was also my MVP of this season. I'm also a big Cyclops fan. Can't help it.
Yeah, that's fine, but he never did anything for me in the movies, which is my main focus when it comes to the X-Men property. And when it comes to the 90s cartoon, he's probably cool and everything, but I can't really remember it. I was a casual viewer. In this season, yeah, I come from that, and I don't have any special love for the character. It's not that I hate the character, and I don't hate any character in the show, but yeah, I never had like a love for a deeper love for Scott Summers or the whole Summers family, by the way.
Summers clan, right?
Yeah,
and there's more of them to come.
I know.
There's always another Summers. I also appreciated Storm in this series as well, and I did like some of the beats that she had with Forge. But I will say, you know, they do pack in the melodrama and the drama. Bo DeMeo, the showrunner, really never saw any drama he didn't like, and he's like, "Oh no, I'm putting it in there."
Yeah, but if I want to watch this kind of drama, I can also watch daytime television.
Yeah, daytime soap would do it. But I think, you know, I'll say this: whether comic book fans are ready to admit it or not, when you buy a comic book every month and you keep reading the installments of the story, you are reading a soap opera. It is an ongoing, long format soap opera. And I think X-Men has always just leaned into that a lot more and said, you know, we're going to make this as, you know, daytime soap opera as we can be. And for the most part, it's turned out to be fairly wildly popular amongst, I would say, X-Men fans at the very least, and comic book fans in general. But is there anything else you wanted to share with us, Grandmaster, in terms of your in-depth analysis on the first season?
No, I think I said it all. Again, overall, I really liked it, but it wasn't perfect.
Understood. And again, I think I can definitely empathize with that point of view, if not fully agree with it. So thank you so much for the commentary there. And Merv, we're moving to you. Last but certainly not least, I need you to throw me a lifeline here because we've got a hard room. We've got some hard eyes in here. But I mean, spectacular voice work, incredible action sequences, the romance, the melodrama that we've come to love as X-Men fans. Some of the greatest villains, right? In all of comic books. Let's be real about that. What was there not to like about this particular season of the X-Men animated series? Give me your in-depth analysis.
Well, while I was sitting here, I made a short list of things that I could understand not liking, or I understand anything, but that I guess I put more emphasis on, like, these are potential flaws. You mentioned something on the board at the beginning or first couple episodes, maybe, where you had a little bit of whiplash, I believe,
Yeah.
as far as like story was going. And I totally understand that, because it was moving at like a knee jerk. It was like, well, this episode is doing all this, and this episode is doing all that, and this episode you're in Motendo, and this episode there's Genosha, and there's like, it was moving around real fast.
It was.
I do think that of like the overall season, there's kind of two really big storylines. There's the X-Men dealing with the absence of Charles Xavier, which is a very big part of that. Whether it be under Cyclops' leadership or Magneto's leadership, it was constantly dealing with that void, and who's going to take command and how are they looked at. And then the other side, which is just dealing with the antagonists, which was Bastion and Sinister, who, especially early on, there's not really any ties between like Sinister and the Sentinels, but as the show progressed, they kind of roped them in together and made them working together. So I do think by the end, like, it was kind of streamlined into, okay, this is where everything was headed, and it's much easier to spot on a rewatch, I guess. But I do think it handled both those like really big, like, overarching storylines. Every character has their own thing going on. And that's always the thing with the X-Men, is every character has their own story that you could read a comic about or watch an episode about or whatever. And I guess that's my second point of potential negative, is maybe there always are, like, that's the kind of a problem with the X-Men too in comics, is that sometimes there are just too many characters to care about. They, especially in this time, the 90s time, and they wanted to recapture that 90s comic feel, but they did legit have two teams, and they were, I believe they were in two different comics. There was like the X-Men comics and the Uncanny X-Men comics, and they were separated by blue and gold, which they do in the series. And that was how they were able to tell smaller stories without having to like package 12 people all together. Well, this show didn't really do that, so I totally understand feeling like overwhelmed with the amount of characters, especially when Morph was randomly transforming into people and you're like, oh, that's not really him.
It wasn't, that wasn't Daredevil. No.
Yeah.
No, I think we actually do see Daredevil, and it wasn't Morph for like 2 seconds.
Correct. Unless it was all Morph, and who knows, which is actually my third point is, I think Taylor used the word nebulous. I think that's a very good descriptor for all mutant abilities, especially with the various evolutions that they've gone on in comics and stuff. You see it here with Emma Frost's diamond form. Like, she didn't have that, and now she does. And it's just, there's no like really good parameters to understand a lot of these. Whenever they want to do something crazy, they just go above and beyond, and it's just kind of part of and I'm not saying it has to be, you have to like it or anything, but it is part of like the ingrain of it, is just like kind of accepting like that some things might not make sense, might not make perfect sense, put it that way. But Morph was one that, like, I still don't really know what his parameters are. Like, Morph in the original series always just struck me as just a shapeshifter, like Mystique, where, even Mystique to some degree, like, she can't like mimic Wolverine's adamantium skeleton, but she can like make something sharp, right, which could potentially stab you. And I just always attribute it to something physical. I don't know. But in here, like, I think they show him displaying various basically superhuman abilities. And even to me, that got confusing. It's like, well, where does his power set stop? Like, why can't he? Is he telekinetic or whatever? I think in the little descriptor at the end of every episode, you say something specific like physical abilities. But again, what does that really mean? When you're talking about super speed versus, the blob's power, it's like, is that all physical? It's very nebulous was a great word. But having said all that, the highlights for me in particular, one episode that I really wanted to mention was episode 3, which is Fire Made Flesh. There were various horror elements in this episode. This is the episode where they realized that, the 2 Jean Greys came in at the very end of the previous episode, and then they realized that the Jean they've been living with, the pregnant one who just had a kid, is actually a clone, and the other Jean's the real Jean or the original Jean. And then clone Jean goes crazy, and Sinister's there, and everything is going haywire, and everyone's like either hallucinating or it's real or whatever. And basically, the mansion turns into a hell pit, and there's demons and monsters and all kinds of stuff happening. I thought everything visually about this episode was just so fun to watch for me. I put it like, it's hard to put it up here with like stuff like the Doctor Strange movies, but to me, like, this was like as close as a cartoon could maybe get to like a Doctor Strange level of surrealness as far as animation goes. Like, it was just very fun to watch. The colors, the color palettes in this episode in particular were just fantastic. I loved when clone Jean turned into the Goblin Queen or whatever she was calling herself. Like, I just loved the way the greens and the purples and stuff and everything just kind of blended together. It was a stimulant to the eyes. So that episode in particular stuck out to me. In general, though, I loved the way that they showed combat for the X-Men, or just anyone really, but the way that they had everyone using their superpowers and working together and using their own powers in ways that are just like out of the ordinary, like Cyclops falling out of the jet and using his eye beam to cushion his landing to make, an awesome intro. Like, that was just something that you never saw, and something you might not even think that he'd be able to do, or like using his beam to like basically backstep real rapidly. And they did stuff like that with every character, and I thought it was just really interesting and just really fun to watch. Like, every time that they got into combat, like, my eyes were glued to every minute detail because it seemed like they showed that level of attention to every character's power set, and I really enjoyed that in particular. The music was fantastic. In particular, Storm's theme, I mentioned it on the board, but every time Storm had like a really cool moment, which, to be fair, that might be another negative, is her being out of like quite a few episodes was actually, I think, a detriment, because she's a great character and she should have probably been in more. I don't really know that she needed to lose her powers here, but it is what it is. But the music, whenever she's stepping in and doing her goddess work and controlling the weather and everything, fantastic. Whatever that theme is, like, I just want that playing in the background of my head every day. Like, it was awesome. And then later on, when Wolverine and Nightcrawler are fighting all the Prime Sentinels, and Nightcrawler specifically like picks up the 2 swords and then the third one with his tail, they start playing like this classical music, and it just fit, and it reminded me of the intro to X-Men 2, the movie. Whenever Nightcrawler's in the White House doing his thing, like, there was a lot of like little throwbacks like that I thought really worked musically, and there was a lot of them from like the previous animated show that tied in, like, especially when Wolverine kisses Jean, and just like there's like theme songs to every character. It feels like whenever I hear it, like I just know that that's relating to this character, and I thought that was great. Character-wise, I found this out over the years, like just ingesting all this media, that I'm much more a fan of characters than I am of plot. A lot of my favorite books, like they're considered like character-centric books, and the plot, if they achieve their goal, it is what it is. So I do think, like, to me, like, the strength of this series really landed on how well I enjoyed seeing these characters interact. And I think that's why I personally like more group teams in superhero stuff than I do like solo ventures. because I like seeing the back and forth. I like seeing all the different love triangles and melodrama and all that stuff like that. That is something I really enjoy. So here, I thought it was fantastic. Just the amount of coverage that you really had, and even like it kind of, there's a little bit of a balance in they didn't get to highlight characters that I wish they would have, like Beast or even Morph to some degree. But they highlighted other ones like better than they've done in decades in any other media outside of comics, like Cyclops. Like I thought this was one of the best versions of Cyclops in media that I've seen probably since the original cartoon outside of the comics. Like in the comics, he is a lot of this character, this version of the character. In the movies especially, like really just ignore him as a character to the detriment of those films in my eyes, like as somebody who's read the comics and understands how important he is to the X-Men lore and franchise. Like I couldn't get enough of him and anything related to him. Like I thought Jean was really strong in this whole series. I thought Cable was another highlight. Like I love Cable anytime he shows up. I loved him in Deadpool 2 as well. In as far as side characters go, like I always like Beast, and I thought Morph was really good here, which is a very different version than we saw mostly in the original cartoon. Because in the original cartoon, he's really tormented throughout all of his appearances outside the very first episode, and in this one, like he is the character that you kind of want him to be. He's still a little bit tormented from the stuff that Sinister put him through, but he is very lighthearted and goofy here, and I just every time he made a quip or a comment, like I was cracking up. So as far as like a character centric cartoon series go, like this was up there. Also got to mention Bastion. I loved Bastion more than like Sinister straight up evil, but Bastion, I understood his motives. I understood where he was coming from, even if I hated him. Like, and I thought the voice actor who did Bastion did a fantastic job of just being able to capture like that power and menacing aspect to the character. Like, I thought it was great. Overall, like I couldn't get enough of this series. Obviously, I've seen it. I've seen it several times over already.
Yeah, I'll skip the perfunctory question about season 2 because I think where you fall on that.
Yeah, I can't wait, especially with the kind of end credits. There was a kind of a loose post credits scene. If anybody caught it.
Yeah. Oh, absolutely. I can't wait for the second season either because they're actually going into some story material with Apocalypse that I thought was, really well done when it was originally in the comics. So Age of Apocalypse especially. But that being said, now that we have gone through the deep dives, we've heard the quick impressions, it is time for the panel to give their season rating for X-Men 97. And if you could give us just a little bit in the way of a justification for what your score is about, that would be great for the listeners at home. Starting with you, Grandmaster, where do you rate this season of X-Men 97?
I'm torn between a 7 and an 8. And I don't like half numbers, but I'm going to give it an 8 out of 10. Like I said, I really enjoyed the season. It caught me from episode 5 onwards. It really grabbed me, and I really loved it. And when they brought back Xavier, it only made it better for me. There are some aspects, like I said during my deeper dive, which I didn't like or didn't really care for, or which takes it down a few notches compared to Murph. By the way, I love how enthusiastic you are about this show. I always enjoy people enjoying stuff. So I'm happy for you. And yeah, 8 out of 10 feels fair for me. Is it the best the MCU has ever done? No. Is it the worst? By far, also no. It's one of the better outings in the last few months, years, and like I said, I really enjoyed it. And if this is a prelude to live action X-Men in the MCU, bring it on.
Right. There you have it. Going to our next champion for the season review rating here. Taylor, what would you give this?
I give it a 5 out of 10 just because I'm so indifferent about it. I don't hate it and I don't like it. For all the reasons that we've already talked about, some of the story beats just kind of bug me. And here's the thing, when we're talking about comic book superheroes, there's going to be fantastic stuff. There's going to be stuff that really wouldn't make sense in the real world. But if it's integrated into a great story, it doesn't matter, because it's a great story. And if they have to do something that doesn't make sense, but if it's not a great story, or if it's just not a story that's grabbing me, you see these things more. They stand out more. So for example, we're breaking into two teams. One team's going to go stop Magneto. Let's send the guy with metal bones on that team. Let's not do that next time.
Yeah.
And him with his claws, he can slice a robot in half, but when he gets the chance to kill Magneto, he does one little teeny poke and then stands there and waits for Magneto to rip his bones out of his body. That kind of bugged me. Also, the underutilization of Jubilee, which they've always done. And again, I didn't watch the original show religiously because I couldn't pay attention to it. But as I recall, they underutilized Jubilee then also. The reason I like Jubilee is she's the only person who's like not mopey and angsty all the time. She's the only person who's like having fun once in a while, or at least happy once in a while, whereas everyone else is all mopey. And they also want to utilize Beast, and Beast is one of the X-Men characters that I actually really like. Beast, I've always liked him. Not the original 1960s, whose superpower was giant feet, but when he turned into a hairy blue monster, I've always liked him. Then I have comics now that from like the 70s where he was a member of the Avengers, and I liked him then. But they didn't use him much hopefully next season they'll use him more, because I think he's a really cool character. And I tend to not like the Omega level characters as much, just because they're overpowered. I like the more street level, like Beast and Wolverine. And I usually like Rogue too, but she didn't do much in this episode other than swoon over. In this season, other than swoon over Magneto, which I didn't care that much for. But yeah, so since I'm totally in the middle about it, it didn't push any of my buttons at all. Giving it 5.
Okay. Hopefully they will come out with a second season that does a little bit more for you. I will jump in on the Beast love. I think the Beast distinguished himself as not just a great X-Men, but a great Marvel character because of the time he spent on the Avengers. He really went out of his way to say, look, there's a lot more going on here than just feared and hated mutant. I can contribute to, top tier superhero teams, which he did for quite a long time in the comic books. At one point, for those of us who were keeping score, he was an Avenger longer than he was an X-Men until he returned to that particular team. But anyway, we have to continue on here with our ratings. So last but certainly not least, Merv, what is your score for this season of X-Men 97?
Well, I'll just quadruple down on the Beast love. As a kid, or like even whatever last week, it's fun to like think of what would your X-Men team be, because there's hundreds of mutants, and he's always like first pick because there's nothing he can't do. He just brings everything to the table. So I mean, not in like an overpowered like cosmic entity kind of way, but like he's strong, he's nimble, he's smart, he's just a great person. He's an anchor to any good team. So in a good way, not a bad anchor, I guess. Yeah. But probably no surprise, 10 out of 10. And I don't think that I don't want you to hear 10 out of 10 and think like, oh, I'm putting it right next to Infinity War or the first Guardians of the Galaxy. It's a different level, I think, especially when I'm talking about TV shows and animated shows, and also it's largely based on where my expectations started. So I expected good things out of the show, and it managed to exceed them. So to me, it's got to be like really high out there. So 10 out of 10 for me. Cannot wait for season 2. I just hope, because there's been, I believe that, I can't remember the name that you mentioned, but the guy in charge is like fired or let go from Marvel. So yeah, so I'm just hoping that isn't the reason that season 2 and onward that I don't like it, at the very least. You know what I mean?
Right. Well, I know Mr. DeMeo was intimately involved with the writing of season 2, which is upcoming. They have greenlit it. So at the very least, while he won't be executive producing or being the showrunner or there when they're in post, we are going to benefit from his blueprint. I think is what's going to happen. And for what it's worth, despite the circumstances of his departure from Marvel, he seems to be completely okay with what's going on as far as the show, and he seems just as excited as anyone else to see season 2. So that said, I purposefully tried to avoid talking about any of the behind the scenes drama about this particular show, as yeah, I think that I think that they'll be able to do a great second season regardless of who's involved, just because of the strength of this IP. But yeah, so there you have it, everybody who's been listening at home. I hope you've really enjoyed the discussion here. We tried to do a deep dive of a full season of an animated show where a lot happened. I have a friend who also, is into the fandoms and the comic booking and all of that, and always says, I love X-Men characters, but I'm not there for the stories, right? And my reflex is always to defend your favorite IP, but there could be something to that particular comment. Maybe this is an IP where you love the characters, and it might not be as important what's going on with them story-wise. You don't have to follow every single detail. But Merv, as my closing comment, I wanted to agree with you in terms of some of the more surreal aspects. Episode 3 was one of my favorites. Whenever you're going into the astral plane, Charles relating to Magneto and helping him through that trauma, I'm like, this is unrealistic AF. Like there's a meteor about to strike Earth and destroy the whole planet, but Charles Xavier is giving Eric Lenshier a therapy session, right, to get him where he needs to be to stop this from happening. And I'm like, only in the X-Men could this be happening, right? Like it's just such a for me a very joyful IP, very vibrant, very surreal. Yeah. But anyway, I think that's going to wrap up today's journey through the world of X-Men 97. I do want to say thank you to our panelists here, Grandmaster, Merv, and Taylor, for their invaluable insights. And I want to thank you all out in the audience for tuning in. Please don't forget to engage with us on social media and to join the discussion on our message board at sakar.freeforums.net. We would love to hear your thoughts and all of your theories. Make sure to subscribe to this YouTube channel, and don't be afraid to hit the like button and to drop some comments in. Hey, we would love to engage with you guys. So until next time, I want to say, as always, that if you are within the sound of my voice, you too are a champion.